how does an airline pilot set his or her altimeter throughout a flight, from the taxi all the way down to the landing. So in today's video we are going to talk about QNH, the standard pressure reference of 1013.25 hectopascal. We are going to talk about transition altitude, transition level, and much more. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. When an airline pilot is on the ground preparing the aircraft for takeoff, okay, he needs to get the ATIS. On the ATIS you get a very important information such as the wind, the temperature, the visibility and so on, but very importantly you get the QNH. Okay, the QNH is expressed in hectopascal. Why it is so important, this information, is because it's the altimeter pressure reference that you need to set for your departure. Why you need to set the QNH when you are departing from an airport is because the first phase of flight all the way up to the transition altitude is a phase of flight that requires the airline pilot to fly altitudes. Why altitudes? Is because you need to be separated from the obstacles and the terrain that are around the departure, the SID, and of course from the other aircraft that are around you. So once you are taking off, so an aircraft is on the ground, the airline pilot prepares the aircraft for takeoff, the pilot taxi out, he takeoffs or she takeoffs, and he has the QNH set on the pressure as a pressure reference on the altimeter. We reach the transition altitude, and the transition altitude guarantees the pilot that the obstacles in that area are no longer a problem. What he or she needs to do is to switch from the QNH to the 1013.25 hectopascal or standard pressure reference. Why do you need to change from the QNH to the 1013 hectopascal? Is because you need to change from flying altitudes to flying flight levels. Why is that and why it's so important? Is because once the terrain is no longer a problem, and as we said, once you cross the transition altitude, the terrain for that specific area is no longer a problem, you want to use the same pressure reference as the other aircraft. Because as you can imagine and as you can understand, the QNH depends and is not the same all over the world. It changes from one place to another. So as you can already understand, an aircraft departing from London, okay, it will have a set on the first part of the flight a different QNH compared to an aircraft departing from Rome. So on the first phase of flight, when the obstacles and the terrain are a problem, you want to use the QNH because your priority is to get a good separation from the obstacles and the terrain and of course the traffic that are around you. But once the terrain and the obstacles are not a problem anymore, you have another problem, and the problem is if two aircraft flying in an opposite route has a different pressure reference on their QNH, you are in risk of collisions, because maybe both aircraft are flying at flight level 310, for example, but because the pilots are using a different pressure reference, a different QNH, the one that they set at the beginning, okay, one pilot is reading maybe flight level 320 and the other pilot is reading flight level 310, they think they are separated by 1000 feet, but in reality they are flying at the same flight level. Why? Because they have a different QNH, a different pressure references set from the beginning. So in order to correct and mitigate this problem, what happens is that when you are alone in the first phase of flight, the obstacles and the terrain and the traffic around you are a problem, so you want to use the QNH in order to use the same reference as the terrain and obstacles around you. But once you reach the transition altitude, you change from the QNH to the 1013 because the terrain is no longer a problem, but the other traffics are still a problem and you want to be separated by them. Just a few seconds to say thank you for subscribing and support my job. I'm here to help you to achieve your goals as a pilot. Remember, if you need an help to prepare your pilot interview, you can go to pilotclimb.com where you can book a private call with me or join the Pilot Climb Pilot Job interview course that I made available for you. So again, thank you very much. Now back to the video. So by using the standard pressure reference of 1013.25 hectopascal, you will not flying altitude, but you don't really care. But the important thing is that you're gonna use the same pressure reference as all the other aircraft that are flying above the transition altitude. In that case, even though your altitude is not 100% correct for every specific phase of flight, it is important to understand that the separation between the other aircraft that are using the same pressure reference is guaranteed. So takeoff, QNH, flying altitude, you reach the transition altitude, you change from QNH, the 1013.25 hectopascal, and you change from altitude and you fly flight levels. You fly all the way down to your destination. During the descent, when the terrain starts to become a problem again, there is another thing called transition level. The transition level will require you to change from the standard pressure reference that you set throughout the flight to the local QNH of that specific area. Again, why? For the same reason, because you want to have a pressure reference that is the same as the obstacle, the terrain and the traffic that are flying in that region, in that area. So at transition level, you change from the standard pressure reference to the local QNH. That's why it's important that before you start the descent, you get the ATIS, the arrival airport ATIS, because in there, you're gonna get the QNH of your destination airport. Once you get the QNH of your destination airport, you start the descent, you reach the transition level, you change from the standard to the QNH. Okay, once you have got that QNH, you use that QNH throughout the approach and landing. Okay guys, so I hope it's a bit clear now how do we set and use the QNH, okay? And why we change from the QNH to the standard pressure reference and vice versa. I made a separate video where I talked about transition level, where I talked about transition altitude and pressure references in general. Go there and watch if you still have any questions. If your questions are still there after watching those videos, leave a comment below and I will help you out. I wish you a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Check, we can set to 70 please.